Deputy Speaker.
I don't know why mine is.
Resume after tea. I recognize the member for Oropouche West, and you have approximately 17 minutes of your initial speaking time. Kindly proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. As I was saying, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we are focusing on cancer and cancer patients under this government. And what we have seen, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is the scrapping of the National Oncology Center by this government. I said a while ago that cancer is the #1 cause of death amongst women. And I also said approximately 1,200 patients die annually from cancer. So what inevitably is happening, Madam Speaker, is that this government has actually forsaken cancer patients who deserve comprehensive and holistic management and care, what we call an integrated medical facility and system. The Oncology Center, Mr. Deputy Speaker, had been earmarked as a modern and essential center of excellence. It was up to first world standard, utilizing cutting-edge technology with experienced and well-trained professionals. And we must recall, this was started under the People's Partnership. It also provided for comprehensive services, including prevention through education, early detection, and an integrated system for patient care for various types of cancer, Mr. Deputy Speaker. But what is the plan, Mr. Deputy Speaker? The plan is that the state-of-art diagnostic, imaging, and advanced medical treatment equipment units will now be fragmented and sent to many different locations for health care. And what would that result in, Mr. Deputy Speaker? Inappropriate, uncoordinated, and incomplete cancer care management at these various centers.
Asking about money released for
Mr. Deputy Speaker,
health.
What will result? This will result in the marked progression of disease of these patients, leading to no cure and subsequent death. So what we need, Madam Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sorry, is that we are asking this government, this Minister of Health perhaps, to reconsider that decision in relation to the removal of that intended equipment for the Oncology Center, for the various institutions, and you must try and see how you could perhaps arbitrate that problem, because it was said there were some problems with a contractor. When we look, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and we're looking at cancer again, you would see that there is a shortage of pharmacists at Sandor Hospital, and there's no medicine for cancer patients, none, absolutely. And I'm looking at an article here, Friday, April 28th, 2017, by Radica de Silva, that says, scores of cancer patients in desperate need of chemotherapy are being turned away from the Oncology Center at the San Fernando General Hospital because of staff shortages at the oncology pharmacy. We have another article here, Tuesday, May 9th, 2017. Cancer patients turn away after a lone pharmacist calls in sick. We have also rat invasion closes oncology pharmacy. And again, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we have cancer patients at the San Fernando Oncology Center facing this new setback with rats.
If you're able to read out all these headlines, we don't have time.
So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, this is happening under this administration. Total forsaking of the cancer patients. I listened to the Honorable Minister, and he spoke about MRI and what is happening with the MRI at various hospitals. But I'm asking the question about the MRI, which was placed at the Scarborough Hospital in Tobago. $34 million was spent on an MRI machine, which was too small for some patients, Mr. Deputy Speaker. So on Sunday, May 1st, 2016, you have the wrong size magnetic resonance imaging machine, valued $34 million, has been installed at the Scarborough General Hospital. Mr. Deputy Speaker, what is government is doing, purchasing things without proper follow-through or proper appraisal. And what happened is that as a result of this, dozens of patients are unable to fit in the MRI machine, Mr. Deputy Speaker. So it means that if you're obese, you can't fit in that machine. So you cannot get your MRI scans. And that is at the Scarborough Hospital. We're not hearing about that. I'm not hearing the minister saying anything about this MRI machine. So these MRI machines, these scans can be done at Alexandra MRI Limited, located at Alexandra Street in Sinclair. But more so, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is that the only MRI machine at a public health institution in this country that can accommodate obese patients is at the Couva Children's Hospital, which remain closed. It remains closed. And what we have there, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is a Magnetum Avanto MRI machine. It is called a 5 Tesla machine, I believe, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the only one in the Western Hemisphere. So it remains, that hospital remains closed. And if we were to deal with the patients that await scan and MRI at the San Fernando General Hospital, Mr. Deputy Speaker, they have to lie in a bed for 2 weeks for imaging studies, for 2 weeks. So there they are, occupying a bed. You cannot get the MRI. The doctors cannot have definite diagnosis, and so they cannot treat the patients properly because of the quality of health care. And I'm making this point cogently clear that you have a CT scan line, a 3.0 magnetum at the Couva Children's Hospital.
Hospital, yes.
And what happens, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I believe the warranty period had expired.
Yeah,
So what happens is that you have staff morale is low at the San Fernando General Hospital. Low, especially nursing staff, because you have now a further influx of patients. Venezuelans, you have the closure of Petrotrain, so they are coming into the hospitals in San Fernando and Port of Spain to get additional service and to secure MRI, which is already overwhelming the overburdened and dysfunctional healthcare system we have. So what we have, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we have patients lying in the bed. Doctors cannot discharge the patients because they cannot get CT or MRI. In fact, Mr. Deputy Speaker, some of these patients, they also die whilst waiting these MRI imaging reports. What we had, Madam Speaker, under the People's Partnership is that they were managing it efficiently, the MRI and CT scans. They had daily slots allocated for inpatients to deal with that inpatient burden. So you go to the ward, the doctors will check through the ward and see, okay, you could get your MRI today, and so you clear the beds so you could get now patients coming in, and you had a movement of patients in and out. So it made it easier. So you had making bed space more available.
Should be the advisor to the minister.
And Mr. Deputy Speaker, is that the longer patient stays, if he stays 2 weeks or 3 weeks in the San Fernando General Hospital, a patient may lie up to 3 weeks in a bed. And the average cost per day, speaking with a senior consultant, is close to $2,000 a day. So for 3 weeks, 21 days, is close to $40,000 plus per bed to house a patient because of some incompetence by somebody that had some mismanagement, that you cannot get the patient rolling out so you can deal with these tests.
Being educated and healthy.
So this is really what is called waste and mismanagement. And we always say where there is no vision,
People
things,
perish. The people perish.
Right? So we have also here, Mr. Deputy Speaker, Article February 23rd, 2019. We're talking about a few months ago, where Southwest Regional Health Authority confirms that the CT scanners are down. They confirm. So the authority said the parts required have been bought and are expected to be delivered and installed in the coming days. This is in February. Mr. Deputy Speaker, we're in June, and those parts are still coming and still to be installed because the MRI machines are still not working and scanners are not working at the San Fernando General Hospital. That is one. We also have 1,200 patients waiting for CT and MRI scans at the San Fernando General Hospital. 1,200. In fact, Mr. Deputy Speaker, some patients, if they are what you call outpatients, they wait up to 2 years. They have a waiting list up to 2 years to get a CT and MRI. 1,200. We have another article here, March 28, 2017, where Mount Hope alone serving Trinidad and Tobago. The CT scanners at 3 of the country's public hospitals are down. In light of the unavailability of the scanning service at the San Fernando General Hospital, San Luis Grande Hospital, and Port of Spain General Hospital, only emergency cases will now be facilitated, and already overwhelmed Eric Williams Medical Sciences Complex at Mount Hope. This is what is happening under this government, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Let us move on, and let us look at what the Honorable Minister said. This is a minister who says and boasts that he would eliminate waste and mismanagement in the procurement of drugs, non-pharmaceuticals, and services in the health sector. But I'm going to ask a few questions here. And I'm asking the question, what is happening to North Central RHA, Mr. Deputy Speaker? Because from the documents I have, and I'm in possession of some documents, it appears that North Central RHA is purchasing medical supplies, gloves, masks, aprons at prices that are 5 times more the market price in some instances.
The Minister has not staying to hear this.
Grossly inflated prices, Mr. Deputy Speaker, 5 times more.
Prime Minister said there's no
From the
corruption in
documents.
government.
Second. Member for Couva South, since we resumed after tea, even though you are not making eye contact with me, but constantly, hearing you, right? So please try and do it in hushed tones, please. Proceed.
Deputy Speaker. From the documents I have also, Mr. Deputy Speaker, there's absolutely no oversight of the procurement processes at the authority, by the management, and by the board, and as well by the line minister. It's my understanding that the authority has received quotes from other suppliers at cheaper prices and ignored them. We also have some internal correspondence from North Central RHA that indicate that the items such as the surgical mask purchase are not suitable for use. And we have the authority, somebody appears, the person in authority trying to distance himself from receiving the goods which the authority has received.
Corruption.
And I will just go through one or two of those, Mr. Deputy Speaker, because we have here a letter sent from the store's clerk to the hospital manager. I'm talking about since the 4th of September 2017. We are going almost 2 years. And to date, these things are still happening. The subject, discrepancy in signature. I am writing this letter to inform you that the signatures on the receiving reports and delivery notes for this particular company, I would not call it company, does not belong to me. So somebody is signing and receiving and not the store's clerk. That is happening under North Central. We have another one here, purchase order. Mr. Deputy Speaker. Purchase order P0105-295. We have gloves.
Corruption.
How much for a box of gloves?
We have the unit price $120, and you're getting it for $25.
Fake oil.
Yeah. Okay. That is what we are getting here.
5 times.
5 times more. You have the apron disposable plastic, what the doctors use in the in the operating theater. You have them at almost $8 for one, when you have the market price is $2. Mr. Deputy Speaker, these may sound very small, but remember they buy in bulk, and we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars that is not accounted for. Hundreds of thousands. And then we have this one additional letter here sent from the business manager operating theater to the complex administrator office. And if I crave your indulgence, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to read 3 lines.
Continue, your initial speaking time has elapsed. You have an additional 15. Avail yourself. Proceed.
Kindly be advised that the face mask which has been provided to the operating theater with elastic bands is not suitable for the doctors and nurses to be utilized within the operating theater. So you see, Mr. Deputy Speaker, you have poor quality thing, 5 times more. These are what we call consumables. And we need to know who is benefiting from these grossly inflated pricing. And perhaps the line minister or somebody who is in charge could call for a forensic auditing reporting this in North Central RHA. We also have at North Central RHA, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we have certain positions that are being filled, certain positions that are created that is not in the org structure. Like we have something called a project improvement manager. I'm trying to figure out what is a project or a hospital improvement manager. Those are positions, if you will check all the RHAs, it is non-existent. So we need to know who is creating these positions and who also fill in those positions. That is what we're asking.
And the compensation packages.
And also, if these things were advertised, if these positions have been advertised, that is what we need to know, Mr. Deputy Speaker. So we have loads of additional information, Mr. Deputy Speaker, which in due course, I will make them available. The other
Finance, development.
situation that I would like to deal with, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is some of the infrastructural problems that we have at San Fernando General Hospital. And at the teaching hospital, for the last year, 4 floors at the San Fernando Teaching Hospital, you have leaks in each floor, 4 floors, and still remain unsolved to this day. You have 2 roofs fell in 2 of the wards, fell in. They call them the roof, not the ceiling, the roof actually fell in. We're talking about putting patients, Mr. Deputy Speaker, their lives at risk. Imagine your foot is broken, and you lie in a bed, you cannot move, and you're watching up and you're seeing something falling down on you. In fact, Mr. Deputy Speaker, if you were to drive to San Fernando, and you look on the left-hand side on top of the hill, you will see a tarpaulin covering the roof in San Fernando General Hospital, a tarpaulin. And I want to know what is looking worse. Is it the magistrate court with the tarpaulin or the hospital? And in fact, we have the mayor of San Fernando saying that he was given notice to close down the magistrate court, and I want that he also gave a notice to Southwest Arbitrary to close down that San Fernando General Hospital, some notice. In fact, the member for San Fernando West, his office is close by, so I'm wondering if we are devaluing San Fernando because his constituency is close by. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we have problems. We have many problems, and the member for Caroni East also spoke about a complete blackout where patients' lives were at risk because you don't have backup electricity. And all this is a problem that has been existing for a little while. And what we have, the urology theater at the San Fernando General Hospital, you don't have electricity there. So you have surgery that has to move now to the general surgical list. So if they move into the general surgical list, it means those who have to undergo surgery, urology surgery, they have to be postponed. And they're fighting for space and time. And that is what is happening there, Mr. Deputy Speaker. The surgeries for cancer patients, colorectal cancers and breast cancers, they all have to be postponed at the San Fernando General Hospital. In fact, you have important procedures such as shockwave lithotripsy, which are continuously being postponed. And what is that, Mr. Deputy Speaker? Many patients may have kidney stones and they have to be crushed. You don't have electricity, so you cannot crush it. So the person remains in constant pain. These are the things people have to undergo. And that we must not stand here and talk about the decadence and morass of the health sector. We mustn't talk about it. You see, Mr. Deputy Speaker, under the People's Partnership, under the leadership of Kamla Prasad Visesa, it was people-centered. People came first, not under this administration. Also, when you look at every health center, the primary care, which is part of the motion, Madam Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speaker, you have poor state. When I've spoken to some of the primary care physicians, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and each physician has complained is either you have equipment there that are non-functional, or you don't have any at the health center. You have walls collapsing in Grand Couva, in La Romaine, in Lengua. You have patients. If rain is falling, you have to run through rain to get to the health center. You have no bed for them to park, sick people. This is what is happening. You have signs all over in the health and primary health care. You don't even have signs. They're all broken. So I will ask perhaps the Honorable Prime Minister, I believe he was sending some $13 million to put signs somewhere. I don't know what those signs are supposed to be, but we can at least start with the primary health care and deal with those healthcare facilities.
Tell San Fernando is okay for Tony Braxton.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, when we look, I believe the Honorable Minister spoke about interns, and they were hiring interns. About 100 interns were hired.
Give them money in the local.
Of those 100 interns, someday they would have been graduated, 1 year internship.
Yeah, yeah.
How many of those
Rakesh
are employed as doctors? How many of those are employed as doctors after their internship? We have over 600 of them, Mr. Deputy Speaker, 600 that cannot get a job in this country. And you know what we're saying? We have shortage of doctors. We couldn't open the Children's Hospital because we can't get doctors. And we have 600 of them. We have an article here, Mr. Deputy Speaker, Trinidad Guardian, dated the 21st of July 2018. Hundreds of graduating doctors cannot find work. They have shattered dreams. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, the doctors who go to Mount Hope in Trinidad and Tobago, they are called creme de la creme. They are the best. They are so trained and bright. When you have to enter the hospital, a graduate program, to enter undergraduate first, and then they will do the postgraduate, you have to have straight A's and 1s. You don't have to have any B profile. That is how bright these children are, these students. And after 5 and 6 years, they cannot get a job. You have,
The parents spend $2 million.
and this is what some of the doctors had to say. They say with no work available, we have to work free at private hospitals in the hope of acquiring medical experience. It is pure exploitation, and nobody is doing anything about it. One medical student said that he didn't want to be identified. Another doctor, a qualified doctor who has been awaiting placement as a house officer, said he has been working part-time in a pharmacy. This is where we have doctors working in a pharmacy.
Some work in service station.
Some pumping gas. In fact, Mr. Deputy Speaker,
In this country.
some people are still being supported by their parents. Imagine your parents sacrifice, pay up to $2 million to send you to study, to become a doctor. Proud. And you still have to mind your child. What does that do to the self-esteem of that graduate?
When they need hundreds in the hospital.
And all the hospitals, you need doctors. In fact, you need nurses too.
And look what he said, life and death.
Some people are still being supported by their parents, so taking up a job in a private hospital with no pay is not a problem. I cannot do this because I have a loan to pay. So you have those, what we have now happening is that you have some of the doctors at 11 month, Mr. Deputy Speaker, their contract comes to an end because they don't want them to work the full year to get any benefits. In fact, we have some of the doctors working month to month. In San Fernando General Hospital, you have some of the doctors working every 3 weeks. How that could be? They are not hiring these doctors. In fact, Mr. Deputy Speaker, soon, in a few months, I will have a son graduate as a doctor. Where will he be employed? These are the things young people have to face under this government, Mr. Deputy Speaker. We have also issues and problems with nurses. Under the People's Partnership, we had the El Dorado Academy training for nurses.
Hundreds of nurses.
No nurses have to find jobs abroad, many of them unemployed.
1,000 vacancies.
In fact, we don't even have training in paramedics. We have just the local training where paramedics training is where you go out in the field and deal with patients. We have the same basic training for attendants and technicians.
To pick you up and put it in the ambulance.
And some of them not even properly trained. That is how bad it is under this government.
Oh, it's terrible.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, when we look at this healthcare system, and we look at the plethora, the modicum of problems that the people have to endure in this country. You remember you're a teacher, a woodman, you said a remark, you wouldn't understand that word. Sorry.
So, Deputy Speaker, 48-4.
Overruled.
Still building that plywood back.
And same time, member, you have 2 more minutes.
Oh, thank you. Hey, finished. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. So in conclusion, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I fully endorse the motion brought by the member for Caroni East. This really could not be more timely. We all understand, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that healthcare cannot be perfect, but as a responsible government, you've got to do things and strive to improve it. This government has proven to be uncaring, irresponsible, especially, Mr. Deputy Speaker, for the poor and the vulnerable in society. They have failed the people of Trinidad and Tobago, and they have failed the health sector. I thank you.
Leader of the House.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, in accordance with Standing Order 53, I beg to move that the debate on motion number 1 on the private member's business be adjourned at this time. Mr. Deputy Speaker, may I point out that this is by agreement, because we know that normally we would await 6 p.m., but this is by agreement.
Honorable members, the question is that the debate on the motion number 1 on the private member's business be adjourned. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. I now call on member for Naparima.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I beg to move the following motion standing in my name. Be it resolved that this House annul the Immigration Amendment Regulations 2019. Mr. Deputy Speaker, we believe that these amendments, these regulations, should be annulled because they are ill-conceived, they are hastily conceptualized, they are not consistent with global best practices, and inconsistent with our first world aspirations. In addition, Mr. Deputy Speaker, they exempt a number of persons declared a prohibited class under Section 8(1)(a) to Q of the Immigration Act. Mr. Deputy Speaker, let me begin by stating our position on Venezuela and the Venezuelan registration issue. We believe that after 3 years of migration to Trinidad and Tobago of nationals from Venezuela, that we need a refugee or a migrant or an asylum policy that recognizes a number of criteria. 1, the absorptive capacity of our key health, education, and economic institutions of our country must be linked to our absorptive capacity. 2, it must be humane. The refugee policy or migrant policy must be humane and recognize the plight of our neighbors, our vecinos, nuestros vecinos in Venezuela. And thirdly, it must recognize our international obligations, especially the 1951 UN Refugee Convention and the 1967 Protocol, and the International Convention on the Protection of the Rights of Migrant Workers and their families that came into effect in 2003. Madam Speaker, please. Madam Speaker, our refugee policy must be data-driven. And Madam Speaker, as of today, we know that there are 16,523 registered to work in Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, we do not know how many Venezuelans are in Trinidad and Tobago at this time because of the inadequacies and the ineptness of the way we approach the registration exercise. Madam Speaker, we believe that the fourth criteria is that it should be premised on a complete lockdown of our borders. We cannot pretend to own a country. We cannot pretend to have a policy when every day there are boatloads of Venezuelans arriving on our shores. In the fifth case, our refugee policy should draw on international best practices. Madam Speaker, later in the debate, I will show how this registration exercise and the regulations and the Form 17A, how it is handled in other societies. I wanted to give Canada and Australia, but I think it would suffice if we look at the Canadian situation. And lastly, Madam Speaker, our refugee policy should serve first and foremost our national interest. Before I get into my presentation, I wish to say that we on this side believe firmly that Venezuelans are human beings and must be entitled to the best treatment, limited only by our capacity to cater responsibly and adequately to their needs. Madam Speaker, we are a nation of immigrants. In my specific case, my mother was born in Barbados. My father was descended from the Americans in Moruga. 2 of my grandchildren are citizens of Barbados, and another is a British citizen. And that is why we in the UNC could not understand and did not support our government when they voted against the humanitarian efforts to supply food to Venezuelans.
Just a minute, please. Are we talking about these regulations?
Yes,
Okay, so I think you've had about 8 minutes to contextualize. Let's get to the matter that we have before us, please.
Good morning. Before, Madam Speaker, I would just like to indicate, because I heard last night in the debate in the other place, the statement by the member from Port of Spain, North St. Anne's West. The member for Port of Spain, North St. Anne's West. I heard it on the parliamentary channel, where he said that our approach and the reason why we are asking for the annulment of these regulations is the fact that we are, on this side, are xenophobic, Madam Speaker. And in fact, there's an article in today's Express which says, and I quote, that Minister Young knocked the UNC for creating xenophobia. Madam Speaker, in accusing us of xenophobia, he clearly expresses his lack of history and more so his understanding of the PNM's approach, the honorable member, to Venezuela. And I'm saying this in the context of the regulations before us. Because if he understood the PNM's philosophy and the philosophy of the founding father of Trinidad and Tobago, he probably would not make that comment in the context of these resolutions. Madam Speaker, I quote from Selwyn Ryan, and he says, and I'm talking about xenophobia here. Williams, and I'm quoting, accused Venezuela of trying to recolonize the region. He saw its efforts as an attempt to transform the Caribbean Sea into the Sea of Venezuela. He said this at the 1975 convention in Chagaramas. Williams told the convention that Venezuela's maritime ambitions had implications for the economies of all or most of the islands in the Caribbean. He said, quote, this is Eric Williams speaking, Venezuela's Caribbean vision and ambitions, starting from the barren, uninhabited rocks to a network of economic arrangements out of which is emerging a Venezuelan oil and industrial metropolis, and indeed an indebted Caribbean hinterland. And he goes on, the Caribbean as we know it integrated into Venezuela. And he made the point that ultimately, Trinidad and Tobago will become what he call a provincia del país Venezuela. So I'll stop here because he spoke.
Point of order, 10-1.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Thank you very much. The Prime Minister, the founder of the PNM and the father of our nation, said, you will understand now why I am pilloried at home and abroad, prodded by Commonwealth colleagues outside of the Caribbean as to why I don't like Venezuela. Madam Speaker, I don't need to go further except to say that there is a historical context in the PNM in terms of our relationships with Venezuela, and therefore they should be the last person to accuse us of xenophobia, Madam Speaker. The very last person. Could only be done because they do not know the history of the PNM. Madam Speaker, I'd just like to debunk a second myth, and after this I'll move on to the actual regulations.
Your argument, but the time you take to paint the context may really make one think about Standing Order 48-1. So you might really wish to reconsider how you want to approach.
And I'll just take a minute. Madam Speaker, it speaks about the fact that this whole set of regulations arose out of a foreign policy of non-intervention in Venezuela, in the Venezuelan situation. I just wanted to remind this House that we have always had a policy of interaction with Venezuela and an involvement in their governance. And I read from Selwyn Ryan's book.
Madam Speaker, Standing Order 48-1, please.
So, member, I'll give you a little leeway. But as I say, I think you appreciate what you want to do. You may want to organize it differently, yes. Or else I'll have to uphold the standard.
All I wish to say is that Eric Williams he was actively involved with Venezuela, such that he and the Minister of Home Affairs were given Venezuela's highest award. And in fact, the Trinidad mission in Caracas was attacked.
To stand up on 48-1. So move on, please.
Okay. My problem with these amendments, Madam Speaker, is that they have imprecise terminology. Imprecise terminology. Are we in support of asylum seekers, these resolutions, or refugees, or migrant workers? The explanatory memo, and I'm being specific here, uses the vague and imprecise terms, quote, nationals of Venezuela residing in Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, that is a concept unknown to international law. A migrant, and I'll explain, a migrant is a person who moves from one place to another to find work or better living conditions. That is a migrant. And an asylum seeker is one who is given protection by a state after fleeing a country as a political refugee. And a refugee is a person who has been forced to leave their country in order to escape war, persecution, or national disaster. So who are we dealing with here? it is clear that the government has taken a decision that they do not want to identify the Venezuelans as refugees. Clearly, because that will give them certain entitlements, which I guess the government is not prepared to give. The question is, and it's important because under the 1951 UN Convention on Refugees and its 1967 protocols, there are clear requirements that we are supposed to give. And Madam Speaker, under the Convention on the Rights of Migrant Workers, we have to give some specific protections. So, Madam Speaker, since we're not clear in trying to understand the regulations, we are not aware in terms of clear, precise definitions of what the government is talking about. And the vagueness of language allows them a lot of leeway, so that an imprecision that makes it difficult to analyze in a debate like this. Madam Speaker, under the International Convention on the Protection of Rights of all Migrant Workers and Members of the Family, when we look at what is conceptualized here in the regulations, it violates on page 14, on page 30, it violates the question of the rights of the children of migrant workers, if in fact they are migrant workers. Madam Speaker, the Article 30 of this regulation says, and I'm showing how the imprecision here, it says, and I quote, "Each child of a migrant worker shall have the basic right of access to education on the basis of equality of treatment with nationals of the state concerned. Access to public preschool education institutions or schools shall not be refused or limited by reason of irregular situation with respect to stay or employment of either parent or by reason of the irregularity of the child's stay in the state of employment." Yet, Madam Speaker, we have the international conventions that are telling us that we have to treat them equally as our citizens. And I'm reading the Minister of Education. I'm stating, and this is June the 6th, 2019, it's Loop TT, and it's an article by Dalisa Gurulal, which says that the minister is saying that educating Trinidad and Tobago nationals shall be a government's priority. So clearly, we have an inconsistency with international obligations and requirements by the convention and the position of the government of Trinidad and Tobago. But, Madam Speaker, there is another question of the issue of privacy. This international convention requires that migrants and migrant workers and their families have a right of privacy, and the information gathered from them ought to be treated as such. Madam Speaker, when we go to the regulation 17, there are 17.1, the appendix. We see, it's not a regulation, I know. When we look at 17.1, we see information being collected by Trinidad government, the Minister of National Security, on these migrants. And I want to make the point that we are arguing that the migrants should be treated with respect and treated with dignity and treated according to the international conventions. We have required a lot of information here, Madam Speaker, and there is no knowledge as to where this information will end up. And Madam Speaker, that was one of the concerns of some of the Venezuelans as far as we have been informed. They are not too sure where this information will finally end up. Madam Speaker, if you look at the Canadian equivalent for refugees, they clearly tell the refugees or the migrant workers, they tell them where this information will go, so that the migrant worker knows precisely what information is given and where it would reside.
Madam Speaker, 48.1. We're not even on refugees or
Yeah.
Migrant workers.
Well, what we're seeing here, as you pointed out, is that the regulations refer to nationals of Venezuela residing in Trinidad and Tobago. So I haven't seen anything here that deals with either migrant workers or refugees in the context that you've defined, because you've defined it in the debate, so that I uphold the point of order made. All right, you've defined those things, but what we're dealing here with hasn't said anything about migrants or refugees.
The point that under the international conventions.
Yeah, but I'm hearing you. I'm hearing you, and I'm hearing the point you're making. But what I'm saying is, in terms of in terms of what yourself have presented, this is not about either migrant workers or refugees, what we have before us, okay? So be guided.
Madam Speaker, whether they're migrant workers, whether they're refugees, whether they're asylum seekers, this information does not protect the privacy rights of the Venezuelans living in Trinidad. Madam Speaker, and I'm saying here that in other countries, persons similarly circumstanced will have a right to privacy. And I'm reading one instance where they say under the Privacy Act and the Access to Information Act in Canada, individuals have the right to protection of and access to personal information. It has nothing to do with the definitions, because we are not clear about who we are dealing with. We have used a concept of convenience, and therefore you cannot put it in any international context or use best practices applicable to our situation. And that is deliberate. And that is one of the problems we have when we say that our policy must be linked to international obligations and based on best practices. Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the second issue I have with these regulations is the question of retroactivity. It is a question of putting the cart before the horse. You register 16,523 plus Venezuelans, and then you adjust the laws and the regulations to fit your ill-conceived notions. Madam Speaker, look at Form 17A, which is inserted after Regulation 46 in accordance with Section 40 of the Immigration Act. There are a litany of inadequacies, which I will deal with later. I refer to one which was indicated in the 2019 Trafficking in Persons Report, Trinidad and Tobago, by the US State Department. They looked at these regulations, they looked at the process that we had, and they found it wanting. And I quote, Madam Speaker, they said that the screening, and here's where I quote, did not adequately screen migrants, asylum seekers, or refugees. And this tells you that they know that we are not using precise terms. So they use a plethora of terms to capture any of the ones that we are thinking about. So it says it did not adequately screen migrants, asylum seekers, or refugees for trafficking indicators, including among Venezuelans. Nowhere in the questions and nowhere in the regulations are there any attempt to find out information that would be relevant to policy making and in respect to dealing with crime situation in Trinidad and Tobago. And the United States pointed it out in their trafficking report. And in their prioritized recommendations, they talked about increased proactive victim identification and screening among migrants, and again they use asylum seekers and refugees to give way to our imprecision. They made the show. And they said ensuring trafficking victims are adequately screened. Madam Speaker, we know anecdotal evidence that a number of Venezuelans are trafficked to Trinidad. We know, I think the members opposite, when they spoke in the other place, mentioned about the fact that women were being lured into Trinidad. We all know it. One would have thought that a serious government doing a screening exercise would at least have a mechanism to find out what are the terms and conditions, how they arrived in Trinidad. Have a decide members of the TTPS, Immigration Department, etc., who are closely looking at this issue. We don't have to wait for the Americans to tell us this. I know they will come afterwards and say that we are alarmists, But you see, any serious person that looks at these regulations and look at our approach to handling the Venezuelan situation will identify significant problems. Language interpretation services were not always available for counseling session and police interviews, even if you had police there. I am not too sure. Madam Speaker, when you look at the numbers of persons, 16,000 and 3 days in 3 centers, it could not get the information that was required. 3 centers and 2 weeks. Sorry, 14 days. It was not enough. It was not enough to get the kind of information that was required. Madam Speaker, you look at other countries who do the same thing like us, and I will compare Form 17A with the equivalent by serious countries. They wanted to find out in a first world country, what could they trace the routes that these persons had utilized to come to their country. In our case, how did they come to Trinidad? We have section D, details of travel. Here, what we have and why we are calling for the annulment of these regulations. We have minuscule, elementary, non-serious questions. How did you come to Trinidad and Tobago? Of your own free will? What was the purpose of your visit to Trinidad and Tobago? Vacation, whatever. Date of departure from the country of origin. Type of transportation, travel documents used. Did you check with immigration officers, etc.? This is what we have. This is what we have. This is what we have. Hear what a serious country has. I'm quoted.
Where are you quoting from, ma'am?
Please describe in chronological order when exactly you and your family members left your home and what route you took. If we wanted to find out how they got into Trinidad and Tobago, explain the mode of transportation taken, the types of vehicles or airlines used, the date, how you paid for travel. You see, Madam Speaker, this would alert us in a serious way to whether the women were trafficked to Trinidad, and the terms of so that when we develop our policies, it will be based on serious information, a data-driven exercise. It went on. If you did not live together, and if we are talking about a family, and here again, you're getting serious information in terms of whether the families were divided, separated, came in bulk together. We're learning this thing in a haphazard way. We heard a boat capsized in the Bocas. Some people died. And some in Trinidad were saying that they were calling, and they had to be families. Therefore, they said it was not trafficking, because these were families living in a group coming to Trinidad. We need to know how many came under those circumstances. We will not get that by this regulation. And that is why I keep saying sometimes about a first world country and a Trinidad and Tobago, we always found wanting. I go on. Please include a copy of your passport stamp if you can. Please indicate whether someone planned your travel or helped you leave or enter a country and how much you paid. That is just one bit of information from the Canadian situation. When I compare it to our situation, if I were a researcher, I would give credence to what I'm reading, and this is the Canadian situation. I'll give another example, Madam Speaker. Please describe in as much detail as possible the specific events which led you to flee your home country. You should include any actions taken against you, your family members, or any others in a similar situation. If the events were generalized, please describe how they affected you personally or what led you to fearing for your safety. You should also indicate whether you sought protection from the authorities of the country, and if not, why not? And for each incident, specify the date, the month, the year, the events which occurred. Madam Speaker, if we are doing serious research on terms of the Venezuelans here, this is the kind of information you need to feedback, and the Americans have said it. They have spotted it in their report. This is not Rodney Charles talking. This is the U.S. State Department. Foreigners in Washington know about the inadequacies of our regulations, and we do not know. I find that problematic, Madam Speaker. So the third issue I have with with the Form 17A. It did not strategically identify opportunities to advance our interests. For example, you're doing a form like this. We have what we call, the United States, first world countries, have mastered the art of the brain drain. Going to countries with difficulties and cherry picking the best and brightest. The United States did that at the Second World War. The US wanted, they knew that Germany had collapsed. They took von Braun and all the German scientists and brought them to the United States and developed their rocket program. NASA was based on United States strategically using regulations and citizenship and pathway and work permits to advance their national interests. Why can't we just as bright as everybody else? We take it everybody, whomsoever will may come. That is our approach. And yesterday, the member for San Fernando West gave on Tuesday, he gave information from about, and I quote, and it was reported in the Trinidad Guardian, Tuesday 27, 2019. Quote, an international study of Venezuelans in Trinidad and Tobago showed 46% of respondents have tertiary or university level education. 53% complain of discrimination because of their nationality, and 14% of complained of being mistreated. This came from the International Organization for Migration. Madam Speaker, this is begging us in our getting information from these immigrants to find out what, I know there are questions on where they worked. It is not sufficient when you compare it with what developed countries do to get information and attract the best and the brightest. We have PDVSA, one of the largest oil companies in the world. PDVSA owns Citco, and when I was at NP and we held discussions with Citco, they had a network of service stations in the United States. And you have there, I think one of the gentlemen was named Asienagas. He was fired, and he probably is in the United States, so he's probably among the list of the 16,000. A person like that with the talent, the marketing talent, the capacity to go in a first world country and move, say a national petroleum to develop gas stations in places where we have large clusters of Trinidadians. That is thinking to the next level. This is where, in Japan, Madam Speaker, they talk about where there's a crisis, they use the word opportunity. And herein lies an opportunity for Trinidad and Tobago if we only use our brains, Madam Speaker. Only use our brains. It's a great misfortune that Trinidad and Tobago has had to be governed by the PNM at this time. Madam Speaker, a fourth issue I have is that the Immigration Act, Clause 8.1, A to Q, the Immigration Act, Clause 8.1, A to Q. Madam Speaker, that Immigration Act has what they call a prohibited class. These regulations and the amendments to the Immigration Act, I am reading the Immigration in Regulation 10.4 to extend the power of the minister to exempt from provisions of the regulations as it relates to work permits to a class of persons who hold a valid permit issued under Section 10 of the Act. Madam Speaker, when you go to 10, they refer back to 8.1. This Immigration Act, for whatever we may believe, for better or for worse, put in a number of what they call prohibited classes. There's a reason for it. I may not agree with all the reasons, but I could see the logic in it. We are asking that these prohibited classes in Clause 8.1 of the Immigration Act, that they be set aside to allow us to regularize and sanitize the Venezuelan in our midst. And I'll read some of the classes, Madam Speaker. And as I say, it is not, I know somebody, they'll get up and say, I say to eliminate all of these. I am saying you use your brain, you go into it, see what is applicable and relevant to our circumstances, what is consistent with our national interests, and retain those. Madam Speaker, It speaks, 8.1, except as provided in subsection 2, entry into Trinidad and Tobago, persons described in this subsection, other than citizens, and subject to section 7.2, residence is prohibited, namely, A, persons who are idiots, imbeciles. I don't like these words. I don't like these words. I don't, but the, Madam Speaker, nobody on that side will make it to Trinidad and Tobago if they're screening using the prohibited class. None of them. None of them. Persons, I started reading, A, persons who are idiots, imbeciles, feeble-minded. He's probably talking about PNM people, Madam Speaker. Suffering from dementia and insane persons. B, persons, have respect now, man. Persons afflicted with any infectious or dangerous infectious disease. Now I could see why are the reasons. If somebody have AIDS, and if a large proportion of the persons, and I'm just saying, we ought to know, and a serious country will put in mechanisms, alert the hospitals, seek to get drugs to treat with the virus. If we really love them, if we really want to care for them, and if we want to protect our citizens, but they do not care, they will come with some fancy excuse and ask me to approve an unclinical and not analyzed exemption of all these classes of prohibited immigrants. Madam, the persons who are dumb and blind, and I believe in equality and all these things, and I'm not saying, I'm just reading it because this is the law. And I'm saying that we could use our discretion. We have used no discretion. It's a carte blanche elimination of the prohibited class. Persons who are dumb, blind, or otherwise physically defected. Persons who are convicted of or admit having committed any crime, which is committed in Trinidad and Tobago. Prostitutes and others. People reasonably suspected of procuring prostitutes. Madam Speaker, this is what the United States talked to us about. Persons who reasonably suspected of attempting to bring into Trinidad and Tobago or procuring prostitutes or other persons for the purpose of prostitution, etc. Habitual beggars and vagrants. And, interestingly, persons who are likely to become charges on the public fund. We learned today in a discussion, we just do not have, notwithstanding what they tell us, what the member for St. Joseph will tell us how the hospitals in Trinidad and the health service is the greatest. Notwithstanding the fact that the member for Diego Martin West will tell us that we have the best healthcare system in the Commonwealth. We know, we citizens who have to go and line up in the public hospital and access services know that there are serious deficiencies in our healthcare system. And anybody who says otherwise is blind to reality or disconnected from the circumstances of our country. Persons who are chronic alcoholics, persons addicted to any drug. We picked up that, or we attempted to pick up that in these regulations. Madam Speaker, I could get any sixth form group of bright students, get any 10, and say, sit down, come up with some regulations to protect Trinidad and Tobago, and at the same time, be humane to the Venezuelans and recognize their plight. They will come up with better regulations than what is before us today, and what they want to surreptitiously pass, and annoyed when we ask questions, legitimate questions. Okay, I withdraw it. I withdraw it, Madam Speaker. Persons concerning whom there are reasonable grounds for believing they are likely to engage in espionage, sabotage, or any other subversive activity. Madam Speaker, I'm hearing stories. I'm hearing stories that there are in the group of Venezuelans, and this Venezuelans talking. There are persons in the group in here who may not have the best interests of Trinidad and Tobago government and our society and its well-being at heart. I am saying, and we on this side are responsibly saying, that we ought to have a mechanism to flesh those things out. Madam Speaker, that's 16,523 persons. I want to ask, and we talk about it, our policy must be data-driven. I heard the member for San Fernando West say we are now getting the data. Madam Speaker, that's 15,523 or whatever is data that cannot be used. It has no meaning. All it means is that there are 15,000 plus persons who came to register. Excluded from that group are persons with a criminal background who were scared that didn't want that their criminal activity to be highlighted. 1. 2, persons who are suspicious of government. Remember, we are talking in Venezuela has a different legal framework from us. They have a very different relationship between the citizen and the government. There's suspicion in between, so that they may transfer that same suspicion to Trinidad and be fearful that the information we provide could end up in other hands. So they would not present themselves. And Madam Speaker, notwithstanding what this government says, our borders are not locked down as of this moment. If you live in Cedros, if you live in Toco, our borders are very porous at this time. And therefore, that 15,000 or whatever has no meaning, no practical meaning in terms of policy planning, policy conceptualization, or policy implementation. It is what it is. It is a thing, a list of people who present themselves to be registered. That is what that is. Nothing else. So, Madam Speaker, again, we could not use our brains to get the kinds of information that we want. So we know better off than we were after the registration than before the registration, because we have information that we cannot use. Madam Speaker, the fifth issue, clause 10.3a to 1, clause 10, 9, 10, 3. Yes, 10.3. Subject to subsection 4, and without prejudice to the generality of his powers under this section, the minister may issue a permit to the following persons to enter Trinidad and Tobago, or being in Trinidad and Tobago to remain therein. That is to say, persons such as are described in section 8.1, A or B, if satisfied that such persons are unlikely to become charges on the funds, on the public funds, on the public purse. Madam Speaker, when I read that, there is no way of the discriminator finding out. At least a question. Do you have funds? Or do you have access to family? I could go to the Australian. I could go to the Canadian. But then, I could go to Singapore. But then they don't like to hear those terms. They do not like to hear first world practices. They like us to believe that everything comes out of Balize House. Madam Speaker, what is the cost? What is the cost of these entry under permit, may issue a permit, if satisfied they are likely to be a charge on the public purse? We don't know. We don't know our absorptive capacity, which is the starting point for any serious policy that would deal with the Venezuelan situation and deal with us. Madam Speaker, let me make the point. And again, if we do not educate our citizens as to the benefits of having Venezuelans here, and if we do not educate them about our international obligations, it is very possible that there could be anger and bitterness because of thoughtlessness on the part of this government. They use the word in my elementary Spanish, sin cerebro, or there's another word in Spanish. Sin means without, cerebro means brain, but they say it's descerebrado, Madam Speaker.
Just remember, I think the standing order we want to put
Yes,
is
I know.
8.1 in English, por favor.
See it as an education exercise.
No.
Seriously.
The language of this
Yes,
parliament
yes.
is English.
Yes, English. English. But anyhow, we will soon have to, learn for our survival. Given this government and the lack of planning, the Guardian newspaper has already, Madam Speaker, begun printing in Spanish, Madam Speaker. And I suggest that if you wish to remain Speaker, Madam Speaker, you may wish to acquire a second language, because I can't trust them to protect. Madam Speaker, this whole exercise, they do not realize that God has entrusted them at this time to the sacred trust of protecting our society. And we face an existentialist, I don't want to use the word threat, that Trinidad and Tobago will be irrevocably changed if we do not manage this situation well. Madam Speaker, I am saying that everything we do must redound to Trinidad and Tobago's benefit. That is what I'm saying. They'll find flippant excuses. But the fundamental point, as the scripture says, Lord, I came unto them, but they do not know. They cannot understand. They cannot understand. Madam Speaker, we need, and that is why we call for a refugee, immigration, migrant, whatever you want to call it. We need to have a long-term strategic plan. We can't wake up at night and catch our VAPs, and then 6 o'clock in the morning come up with a plan, and then do things. And then when you look and you say, but what does this mean? What are the implications? Where do these things fit in the overall trajectory of our society? This is why Eric Williams, sometimes I wonder if they're P&M. Eric Williams, when you look at him and you read, you see a person who had a long-term vision, Madam Speaker. I am not seeing it on El Otro, sorry, it's Spanish, on the other side.
Standing order 8-1, please.
And 48-1.
All right, so continue with your spirited contribution, and the more English, the better. That's what they're trying to say.
Right, Madam Speaker? I have this problem of seeing the future now. It's something to do with the wheel, Madam Speaker. It's something to do with the power of discernment, being a Baptist, Madam Speaker. And I see where we're going under this government. And I'm preparing myself because I don't operate by VAPs. Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, residency as a pathway to citizenship. Now, they could say what they want. Either they will bumble into it, or it is planned. And it has to do with, this question of what is the long-term plan? And Madam Speaker, in doing this, we cannot trust the other side. Because they say things. One minister says one thing, and another minister says something else. And Madam Speaker, if we understand that we have Venezuelans here, and we're supposed to treat them 1 minute alone. Oh. Anyhow, the Minister of Foreign Affairs said, Dennis Moses said, that it is hoped that the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago will undertake such documentation programs where appropriate in cooperation with UNHCR and other stakeholders, such as the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services, the Ministry of Education, and the Elections and Boundaries Commission.
Member for Naparima, I beg to move.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move.
Honorable members, this motion requires a seconder. Member for Point up here.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. What is that? Madam Speaker, I second the motion and I reserve my right to speak.
Excuse me?
I second the motion, Madam Speaker, and I reserve my right to speak.
Honorable members, the motion being seconded, I shall now propose the question for debate. Be it resolved that this House annul the Immigration Amendment Regulations 2019. Member for Port of Spain North, St. Anne's West.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, it never ceases to amaze me the fact that in the multitude of misinformation, that basket, that bucket of misinformation, how quickly they can pull one fish out of misinformation and replace it with a next. For the last few weeks, Madam Speaker, we've had none other, and I'm disappointed that the Honourable Member for Siparia isn't here today. We've had the Leader of the Opposition out there screaming at the top of a senior council lung, telling the population that the whole registration process was an election ploy and an election gimmick by the People's National Movement. We had the high decibel, very excitable, very misguided and misled person in the other house, the leader of the bench in the other house, come earlier this week and lead the charge that this whole registration process was to do with elections. Of course, that was, with one fell swoop, debunked in the other place. Demolished, as the Attorney General says. So we come here this afternoon, and I was wondering, on what basis would they look to pursue this motion now in this House? And I cannot say that I'm surprised. I cannot say that I'm disappointed, but it has gone exactly according to plan. What I'm having great difficulty in doing, though, Madam Speaker, is understanding exactly what was said and what was the point and what was the approach of the last 40 or so odd minutes. But for the population, I'd like to start by saying, because I'll speak to the population, Madam Speaker. I'll use my time to speak to them, the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago and others. I want to start, Madam Speaker, through this House by thanking all of the public servants and volunteers who participated in a very successful registration of Venezuelans process. The Immigration Department, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, the Defense Force, the medical doctors and nurses, the Children's Authority, all of the volunteers, and those from the Ministry of National Security and other ministries, including the Ministry of Communication, who, under a lot of intense pressure, for a 2-week period, pulled off a very successful registration of Venezuelans. Madam Speaker, the Hansard would reflect not too long ago, in this very House, I warned the population of two concepts, and I put down, as I call it, markers. The first marker was the marker of dog whistling. The second marker I raised, and it is coming to pass from all different directions, albeit from the same place on the other side, that of a continued action pointed towards promoting xenophobia. So I heard those on the other side say they're not engaging in this. I'd like to refer, Madam Speaker, to Wednesday, the 26th of June, 2019, none other than the editorial in one of our daily newspapers, the Guardian newspaper. And I'll refer to some of that editorial. So this is not PNM. This is not us on this side. But thankfully, once again, it was a PNM government that warned the population not too long ago, listen for the dog whistles, be aware, and those on the other side are promoting xenophobia in Trinidad. And the article, the editorial starts off, avoid that dog whistle. Venezuelan nationals have been living among us for more than a century. Many of them ventured into remote areas to establish communities which still practice aspects of their way of life. In fact, the majority of 1.4 million people living in Trinidad and Tobago can trace their own family roots to other Caribbean islands, their forefathers being descendants of the first peoples, African slaves, Indian and Chinese indentured immigrants, and European estate owners. With this in mind, we urge opposition leader Kamala Persad-Bissessar and her deputy political leader Jerlene John to reconsider the statements they made on political platforms, which can be construed as race baiting and xenophobia, targeting the 15,000 plus migrants who signed up for this country's one-year amnesty. This is what the Guardian editorial said on Wednesday of this week. Because we started off this week, Madam Speaker, in the country on Monday night, hearing the screams and the cries and the whistles. They're no longer dog whistles. Because in their typical style, they're blowing it into very loud whistles to try and create xenophobia. And they have a newspaper warning the population, as this government did, be cautious. See it for what it is. They go on to say, Ms. Persad-Bissessar at an Eid dinner on Sunday claimed the government was seeking to amend the immigration regulations, the same thing we're here to debate today, to allow Venezuelan nationals to vote in the 2020 general elections to give the PNM an edge in marginal seats. The opposition leader stated, quote, "What is frightening in those regulations is that it is giving power to the minister in charge of immigration to regularize and naturalize aliens." According to Ms. Prasad-Bissessar, this gives power to a minister, a politician, and a member of the present government the power to make any of the 14,000 or 20,000 Venezuelans a resident or citizen of the country. Such claims by the opposition leader can have the effect of planting seeds of divisiveness in the minds of the electorate, more so gullible party supporters. The Election and Boundaries Commission, an independent institution, as well as the Chief Immigration Officer, should move to dispel any such concerns. If left unchecked, such statements can fan the flames of discord even more. National Security Minister Stuart Young said the immigration regulation seeks to remove the requirement for recently registered Venezuelan migrants to apply for work permits during their one-year amnesty. So, Madam Speaker, a PNM government and administration charged with the responsibility of running this country told the population weeks ago, we're hearing the dog whistles. Do not go down the road of xenophobia. And I am happy to report, Madam Speaker, to this House and to the population, the registration process started on the 31st of May. It ended, as we said it would end, on the 14th of June. And the vast majority of citizens of Trinidad and Tobago accepted it without any hesitation, supported it without any hesitation. And I use this point in time, Madam Speaker, through you, to tell the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, this government came out very clearly when we announced this registration process for the first time on the 11th of April, 11 weeks ago, that the #1 priority of the government is the people of Trinidad and Tobago. You see, Madam Speaker, the history behind this registration process, despite all of the rants and raves we've heard here for the last 40 minutes, was to gather the intelligence. It was to gather the information. It was to gather the type of evidence that we needed to understand with clarity and with hard data what Trinidad and Tobago was facing. Because we've had international bodies. 2 years ago, the UNHCR declaring to the world 40,000 Venezuelans in Trinidad. 2 years ago. And it was only in January of this year that things began to deteriorate so badly in Venezuela, when all of a sudden, one morning, someone woke up and decided, I too am a president, in January of 2019. And that's when chaos broke out and when the mass migration began to take place. So all of the stirring up and all of the screams and cries, the data does not support it. So 2 years ago, when things were a lot more stable, there was a declaration by a body that there were 40,000 Venezuelans in Trinidad. Madam Speaker, yes, we heard it in this exact house by the member for Naparima, 60,000, 80,000, Senator Mark in another place, 100,000. Well, I am happy to tell the people of Trinidad and Tobago, despite all of the screams and the cries and the attempts at creating xenophobia, and the no longer dog whistles, but proper whistles now, by those on the other side, that after a very successful 2-week registration process, where on every day except Eid, the registration centers in 3 locations, Port of Spain, San Fernando, and Tobago, were open, and we took the Venezuelans in, and we registered them, that there are 16,523 Venezuelans registered in Trinidad and Tobago at the end of that process. Furthermore, Madam Speaker, the statistics are that out of that, we have 7,016 females, 9,507 males. The total number of minors registered is 2,421, of which 1,211 are female, 1,210 are male. So I also heard a scream and a cry a short while ago, as we were hearing a very confuffled contribution that was all over the place, but screaming and down crying, importantly, Trinidad and Tobago, and saying Trinidad and Tobago is not first world. We reject that on this side. We conducted a first world exercise, and we are proud of it. It is actually better than what we see going on in other places. Because I'll tell you something, Madam Speaker, there were other places on the border, land borders of Venezuela, that all of a sudden realized and woke up one morning, Christ, we cannot handle it on the border anymore. Close off the border, impose visas. I will tell the population of Trinidad and Tobago, despite all of the screams and cries, this country, under the leadership of the member for Diego Martin West, had a very carefully thought out strategic plan, and we announced to the nation when we were ready to tell persons what the plan was. We could not announce, we knew, 3 of us knew when we were going to come with the visa system. And it would be implemented immediately after the registration process. We couldn't go out and tell people that because it would have been a bigger pull factor. At the time when we were conducting the registration process, there were screams and cries, all sorts of misinformation. As soon as the registration process ended, at 5 p.m. on Friday, the 14th of June, I, as the Minister of National Security, addressed the nation in a press conference at 6 p.m., an hour later, and told the country, come Monday, we will be introducing visas for Venezuelans coming into Trinidad and Tobago, and it has been implemented. Because we knew we had given the opportunity, whether you're here legally or illegally, come and register. And it happened, and it went well. Madam Speaker, we've heard a lot of screaming and crying because they could no longer pursue the elections argument. That's been completely debunked. And just for the record in this House, Madam Speaker, I'd like to tell the population that on the 11th of April, at a post-cabinet, when I came and announced what cabinet had decided, because cabinet sat down, looked at the policy, thought it through, and then took decisions. And immediately after we took the decision on the 11th of April, I was tasked to go and tell the world what Trinidad and Tobago's cabinet had decided on behalf of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And these were the salient points that I announced. That there would be a temporary and limited registration, migrant registration framework process. That 2-week period would commence on the 31st of May 2019 and it would end on the 14th of June 2019. At the registration process, the Venezuelan nationals will be required to be fingerprinted, have their photographs taken, provide evidence that they are Venezuelan, provide a local address where they're staying, and fill out forms that would be designed to obtain as much pertinent information as possible. And that is part of what we're looking at here today. And I want to tell the population of Trinidad and Tobago, lest they be misled as usual with respect to the laws of Trinidad and Tobago. The form that was brought into place by me signing as the Minister of National Security on the 24th day of May 2019, the form used in the Venezuelan registration process, is what we're here today as part of the regulations. That form became law on the 24th of May 2019. That form has been used in a completed registration process. It ended on the 14th of June. The registration is over. So to bring this House here today to debate something that is now passé, something that has gone, something that was used as the law in accordance with the law of Trinidad and Tobago, let the people of Trinidad and Tobago take note and let them ask themselves, why? Why the challenge after the process? Why the challenge after the process and the use of our time today? But I am happy for the opportunity, Madam Speaker, happy for the opportunity to talk to Trinidad and Tobago and to warn them about what could happen if there were ever a change in attitude. Another important point that's pointed out on the 11th of April 2019 is the only free health care that will be permitted to registered Venezuelans will be emergency medical services, primary health care at public health, as set out in an appendix. So going to the accident and emergency, everything apart from that, you have to pay for. The most important, arguably, one of the most important points that we told the world on the 11th of April is this, Madam Speaker. The migrant registration process and the period permitted to any Venezuelan to be here under this policy will not form part of any calculation of the time to apply for residency. That is the policy in black and white. So at the outset, we said, we're going to permit you to work for a year. You have to come back in 6 months and we'll review it, and we may give you an extension for another 6 months. But the important point is, none of this time, not a second, not a minute, not an hour, not a year, would count towards you applying for residency, citizenship, or even a work permit. This is not a ministerial permit being handed out here. What we said, it is a work permit exemption. So, Madam Speaker, to vote in Trinidad and Tobago, to be eligible to vote, you have to be a citizen. None of them are citizens. We've said from the outset, our policy is none of the time in this period of a year can count towards citizenship, residency, or even a work permit. You have to be a Commonwealth citizen. As far as we are aware, Venezuela is not a Commonwealth country. The next set of category of people that it could vote in Trinidad is a non-Commonwealth citizen, 18 years or older, who has resided legally in Trinidad and Tobago for a period of at least 5 years. Again, impossible. There's a local government election this year. Doesn't equate to 5 years being resident in Trinidad or residing here legally for over 5 years, nor does a general election of next year. But we had senior counsel, leader of the opposition, former Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, try to mislead a former Attorney General, former Minister of Legal Affairs, former Minister of Education, try to mislead the population and try to say that this administration was using this process to make people eligible to vote. That's a long-term plan, where on the 11th of April, in black and white, the decision taken by Cabinet is that not a single day out of this registration process would count towards citizenship. So completely debunks that. So what do they do now? Because they'd already embarrassed themselves by filing this ridiculous motion. They come here today and they bad talk Trinidad and Tobago. They insult Trinidad and Tobago. Basically say Trinidad and Tobago is not first world. And you heard the ridiculous submissions, Madam Speaker. The member for Naparima referred to the form and said this form is not first world. On one hand, he said, you're gathering too much information. You're invading people's privacy, is what he said. And then on the next breath, with the next breath, he says, it's too much information, it's not enough information. And listen to the ridiculous proposition. And again, I say respectfully, and the Hansard would reflect it, dishonestly does not even say what is in the form properly. So let's go to it. Details of travel, section D of the form, which is part of the regulation here today. And for the population of Trinidad, because they don't have the form in front of them. This is what we, your government and your immigration department ask as only part of the registration process. Did you come to Trinidad and Tobago of your own free will? A box to say yes and a box to say no. What's the purpose of that? Doesn't that tell you whether you're part of a trafficking exercise? Did someone force you? And I'll tell you, right, all of the screaming and shouting and abuse of Trinidad and Tobago, how we're not first world. Not true. That simple question with a yes or no answer gives us the information we need. And they cannot even say the people would be there under duress because we made sure to protect their privacy. The media wanted to come in the registration centers. We gave the instruction no. Only people registering could come into the registration centers and people who were vetted to be inside. A person could not just walk inside there. You had to be vetted. We had to identify you before as a person participating in the process and let you in. So they couldn't have, if someone brought them there, they couldn't come in the room, and we got the information. We gathered so much intelligence in this 2-week registration process. I am proud of the process. The next question, what was the purpose of your visit to Trinidad and Tobago? Vacation, visiting friends, business, study, work, or other? Again, completely legitimate, and anybody who's traveled to any first world country in the world would see the same questions asked on a form. Next question, date of departure from country of origin, day, month, and year. Well, obviously you want to know what day they left and when they were coming here, but what we heard the member quote from some unknown form is some different language asking the same question. Next question, place of departure, indicates state, province, municipality, city, or town. Completely irrelevant. Did you come from Tocopito? Did you come from Caracas? Did you come from Maracaibo? We gather all of that information. Next question, type of transportation, air or sea? Well, I heard a lot. He didn't say what it was. He just said, right, what vehicle and what vessel. Well, I want the population of Trinidad and Tobago to know that the member for Naparima is making a suggestion that there is any other way you can get from Venezuela to Trinidad as opposed to flying in air or via sea. We on this side, he talk plenty about being bright. Well, I am telling you all something here this evening, Madam Speaker. I am going to have a meeting with immigration because as the member for Naparima correctly quoted the law and he correctly talked about the prohibited class, and he quoted some of the prohibited class, and two jumped out to me when he was quoting it. In the prohibited individuals of Trinidad and Tobago, and I am calling a meeting with immigration to speak to them about this. Imbeciles and idiots. I want to know, Madam Speaker, how the imbeciles and idiots got into this country. Not the Venezuelans, you know. Not the Venezuelans, you know. But some people, Madam Speaker, some people who have traveled in and out of Trinidad and Tobago over time, some people, Madam Speaker. Immigration has to answer. Madam Speaker, immigration has to answer how imbeciles and idiots got in and found their way into this house. I want to know. So the next question on it, because you could only enter from Venezuela to Trinidad, you could only enter from Venezuela to Trinidad by sea or by air. So completely legitimate answer. I heard him say vehicles. So I am going to ask immigration. You need to ask questions when certain members have traveled and they want to get back in. And if they answer you that they ask this simple question, ask the member when he comes back into Trinidad, what are the two ways you could get to Trinidad from Venezuela? And if he tells you a vehicle, as an imbecile or idiot, and don't let him in. The next question on the form is, did you check with immigration upon arrival in Trinidad and Tobago, yes or no? The whole purpose behind that is to determine whether they entered legally or illegally. The next question, travel document used, passport, visa, other, indicate if departure from your country of origin was in an irregular way, yes or no? Completely legitimate question, and it shows you the thought process, because we heard, be bright, we must be bright. Completely legitimate question, because that in itself, we knew from beforehand there were going to be certain people registering or attempting to register who would not have identification on them. So we're asking them, what do you have? And if they don't have, we then ask them if your departure from your country of origin was irregular in any way. And they answered truthfully. We got information as to what boats were bringing people in, where they were departing for, how much money they were being paid, they had to pay to get here, who the people charging were, etc. And I tell the country now, without fear of contradiction, that intelligence is currently being analyzed by us at National Security, and the country will see operations where we go after the big fish who have acted in human trafficking in Trinidad and Tobago. Date of arrival to Trinidad and Tobago, completely legitimate. Port of entry, airport, Piaco, ANR Robinson, Tobago. Those are the only two airports in Trinidad and Tobago, legal airports for persons international entry into Trinidad and Tobago. Where does the member for Naparima want us to put else there? And seaports, we put Port of Spain, San Fernando, Scarborough, Chaguaramas, Cedras, again the only legal ports of entry, and then we even took the precaution of putting other. So, Madam Speaker, let the population of Trinidad and Tobago know that a lot of time was spent here this evening filibustering, because you see, their whole argument, the opposition's whole argument that this process was illegitimate and meant to be towards voter padding fell through. It fell through. It was completely demolished. But the member for Naparima, as he admitted in his contribution, likes to spin. So he was sent here today to spin the wheel. But the population of Trinidad and Tobago is a sensible one, and they will see through it. So, Madam President, Madam Speaker, I'd like to also use this opportunity to put on the record, to put on the Hansard in the House, the suggestion that this government would ever use the granting of citizenship and residency in any way other than in accordance with the Act and how it should be used. Because you see, as I read the editorial, the suggestion by the other side is all of a sudden this regulation is giving the Minister of National Security, who's in charge of immigration, some superpower. Some superpower that I could now, or whoever is the minister, could now give citizenship right. Here it is. Give rights of residency or citizenship and remove any requirements. That is not what this regulation does. And I will have the people of Trinidad and Tobago know from the time we had an Immigration Act in Trinidad and Tobago, from the time there was a Minister of National Security in Trinidad and Tobago, whoever that office holder is the only person in law, who has the power to grant citizenship or residency to someone in Trinidad and Tobago. The regulation does nothing to change that. What this regulation does is it puts a proper process for registration that has come, has gone, is completed, and was successful, has provided us with sufficient information and intelligence that we are now using. Let me tell the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago what happened, though, prior to this. In 2010, the then Minister of National Security granted 324 persons citizenship, 465 permanent residencies, totaling 807 in 2010. In 2011, the Minister of National Security granted 268 citizenships, 556 permanent residencies, going up from 807 to 824. Whoever was there, because you know, Madam Speaker, they changed them like dirty underwear. Every week, it was a new Minister of National Security under the former administration. In 2012, number of citizenships, 313, 874 permanent residents. They went up to 1,187. In 2013, when the new local government was coming up, they went 194 citizenships, 852 residencies, 1,046 in total. In 2014, a different Minister of National Security was terminated for telling the truth against an Attorney General who's now facing the courts in 2 sets of criminal proceedings. Only 132 citizenships granted, 658 residencies, dropped it to 790, the lowest. Now, in 2015, the country saw the light, the country wanted a change and knew they needed to change and put this administration in place. In 2015, 34 citizenships granted, 34, and 170 permanent residencies. Understanding that the member for Point Fortin became the Minister of National Security on the 9th of September. So 9 months had gone. So even with that, there were only 204 in total granted that year. First full year of us being the administration, 15, this is 2016, 15 citizenships and 93 permanent residencies, 108. So let the population of Trinidad and Tobago see the hard, cold data and facts. That they came in first year, 800. Second year, 824. Third year, 1,187. Next year, 1,046. Next year, 790. The first full PNM year, 108 permanent residencies and citizenships granted. Is that a government that is looking to pull the wool over the country's eyes? We don't need to do that to win an election. And Madam Speaker, I take the opportunity to also remind the country that during their tenure, they came with a proposition to have a 3-month amnesty to grant permanent residency and citizenship to any illegal immigrant in Trinidad and Tobago. Any illegal, thank God that didn't take place because there were 110,000 illegal immigrants, and that is how they plan to win the elections. So I am not surprised that that was the tact taken.
Member for Port of Spain North St. Anne's West, your original 30 minutes are now spent. You're entitled to 15 more minutes to wind up your presentation. You may proceed.
So, Madam Speaker, to get back to the registration process and to just finish that point that I was making, the dishonest attempt to mislead the population once again, on the one hand, and to stir up xenophobia on the other hand, by none other than the member for Superior, leader of the opposition, fails. But what it does, and the country must take note, is it exposes their way of thinking, Madam Speaker, the opposition's way of thinking, that they would try to steal an election that way. But thank God for the people of Trinidad, it's a PNM government, and we have no such intention. Now, let's deal with some of the interesting gymnastics, mental gymnastics that took place. First, unfortunately, once again, evidence of the most blatant attempt to mislead the population. The suggestion by the member for Naparima over and over and over again that the United States TIPS report, Trafficking in Persons report of 2019, somehow criticized this registration process. That is what the member said over and over. For the record, Trinidad and Tobago, that TIPS report is actually up to 2018, although published in 2019. It does not go to May and June of 2019. So with the most blatant of dishonest intentions, an attempt was made nakedly to the population here today to suggest that the US State Department has criticized this registration process. And I could tell the people of Trinidad and Tobago, it is quite the opposite. We got commendations by the US for the registration process that was carried out. Not that we need anybody's commendations, you know, because this government does what is right for Trinidad and Tobago. This government protects the sovereignty of Trinidad and Tobago. And this government, this PNM government, under the leader from Diego Martin West, will not have any country in the world dictate to us how we should run our country, and we stand proud to say so. But we hear the member for Naparima suggest that somehow the United States slapped us on our wrist via US State Department report. Completely untrue. The report is predating even the announcement of a registration process. The report in no way refers to the registration process. The blatant, dishonest attempt to use a reference to screening for refugees, and notice I did not mention that word until now because we are not dealing with refugees in Trinidad and Tobago from anywhere. We are dealing with migrants who have left Venezuela in Trinidad and Tobago. Because you see, refugee has a certain connotation and a certain definition, Madam Speaker. And this government has not reached anywhere near that place. We took a decision, who is here, we will register you, whether you came in legally or illegally. After that, the borders are closed once again, and we took an extra precaution of adding, you must now have a visa, so there's a visa requirement. The attack as well, and the continued dishonest attempt to mislead the population and say Cedros and Toko open. Well, they have one councillor down in Cedros who love a camera. I went down there with Minister Dillon to tour Point 14 a few months ago. One of the things we did is we went to the port of Cedros to see the operations. This is long before this, but we knew this was coming. But we went down there to tour and for Minister Dillon to make the recommendations as how we could improve the workstations, etc. So, of course, cameras arrived. Well, my boy come running down the beach, man. He smelled a camera. He smelled the camera from wherever he was and he reached. And this councillor continues up to this week to try and mislead the population, saying hundreds and thousands are coming in Cedros. The next member from Naparima today telling us, coming in Toko, coming in now, coming in Cedros. I will have the population know this. Our radar system is working. Our radar system is being upgraded. And I went to the radar system after the registration process because we'd been monitoring all before. And what I'd said even before, after consultation with Minister Dillon, I said, you know what? Let's use the intelligence and the data we get from the radar system. Because you see, Madam Speaker, boats take certain pathways even in the sea. So we looked at it over months. This was starting over a year ago. And we began analyzing the data to see where marine vessels come into Trinidad and Tobago from. Because we knew we had limited resources, marine resources with the Coast Guard. And I don't want to get in tonight as to why we had those limited resources. But we used that intelligence. We knew where they were coming in. And I want the population of Trinidad and Tobago to know that the day after June 14th, when the registration process closed, so June 15th, there was one marine vessel coming from Venezuela, and we intercepted it. One. And it wasn't carrying hundreds, and it wasn't carrying thousands. Because you see, you have a chairman in Siparia as well, who can't fly on a plane between Trinidad and Tobago anymore, because stewardesses don't want to go on the plane. He himself came out this week and said there's thousands coming in on the beach. Completely untrue. So the people of Trinidad and Tobago know and thank your Coast Guard, your Defense Force, and your police service for the work they did. Because yes, vessels got in. It is impossible to man every border. In fact, this week we saw in the largest economy of the world, the richest economy of the world, or one of the richest of the world, we saw something that stopped all of our hearts from beating for a while. We saw people who have been desperately trying to cross the border, and it's not even a sea border, desperately trying to cross a land border. And one of the worst things we can witness as humans, a father and his 2-year-old daughter died in that attempt to cross the border into the United States. So if the United States has those types of problems on their border, it is wrong. It is wrong for leaders of this country and parliamentarians to keep crying down the work being done by Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard, Defense Force, and Police Service as we try to humanely man the borders. And I'll give this story as well. Misinformation about vessels being lost between Venezuela and Trinidad. And it was said by Naparima, persons drowning and dying in the Bocas. Completely untrue. Completely untrue. And what we were doing as we were manning our borders, our maritime borders, we found vessels coming up, and when they saw the Coast Guard approaching them, somebody would drop down in the boat and pretend they're having a heart attack. And on instructions, we said, go back to Venezuela and seek medical attention. And you know what happened, Madam Speaker? As the boat went back to Venezuela, fella get up, he dust off, heart attack done. The next week, because they knew the Coast Guard was out there, stopped the vessel. All of a sudden, a vessel that was making its way from Venezuela sprung a leak as the Coast Guard stopped it. Obviously, intentionally done. What did we do? The humanitarian thing. Took them on board and brought them ashore. I take this opportunity through you, Madam Speaker, and on behalf of the members on this side, to thank the men and women in Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard for the tremendous work they did and continue to do. So the U.S. State Department Report 2019 TIPS report has nothing to do with the registration process. So completely false. I've dealt with the prohibited individuals, but what I want to say, lest anybody in Trinidad and Tobago listens to a word that Naparima has to say apart from I beg to move. These regulations do nothing to affect the prohibitive class. So even in our registration process, we continue to maintain the legal ability that if someone fell foul of any member of the prohibitive class, we can turn them away. I want the people of Trinidad and Tobago to know as well, Madam Speaker, we have not given out a single registration card as yet. All we've done is register and we've gathered the information. And you know why? Because despite all said by Naparima, we're doing the due diligence. So we are right now working out who should and shouldn't be here. We're working out who is or isn't a criminal. And I have been signing deportation orders. And we have gathered the data. So people of Trinidad and Tobago know that your government got it right. And we have gathered the data.
Data is not a plan. Intelligence is not a plan.
Another point I'd like to make, Madam Speaker, is part of this process, part of the gathering of intelligence, gathering of information, it is important to put on the record that on Friday, the 14th of June at 5 p.m., there was no one outside of the Queen's Park Oval. So you hear them screaming, up to now, screaming, member for Naparima, it's 60,000. The next one, in the other place, most irritating voice. 100,000. 100,000. However he talks like a imp. 100,000. Sorry, ma'am.
Member, no personal reflection, so just withdraw that, please.
So, ma'am, the
Withdraw
point,
that.
I withdraw it, ma'am.
Yes, please.
The point is that even at this stage, the attempts to inflate figures in the most ridiculous of manners. The best test of whether this registration process gave an accurate reflection to the people of Trinidad and Tobago as to whether we have registered, I would say 99% of the people here, is what happens at the end of the process. So on Friday at 5 o'clock, Port of Spain, which had the most registration throughout the period, the street outside the Oval was empty. No one was rushing to say, allow me still to register. San Fernando, locked off at 5 o'clock in the evening. Everyone was registered. It finished 4 o'clock in the morning. Tobago, there was a minor hiccup on humanitarian grounds. Somebody without instructions and permission took a number of persons who had lined up to register down to a covered mall. We found them. I took the decision after consulting with the chairman of National Security Council. We'll ring fence them in there, determine who is registered, who isn't, and complete the registration, all done. Monday morning, in San Fernando alone, some people turn up and say they haven't been registered. Mischief. I say mischief. Because come Tuesday, come Wednesday, come Thursday, come now, nobody else has turned up to claim non-registration. I'd also like to say, Madam Speaker, in closing, that gives the population of Trinidad and Tobago and the world the best litmus test as to the success and accuracy of the registration process. Because if there were still thousands and tens of thousands, because it's 16,523 registered, if there were even still hundreds looking to be registered, I guarantee the population they would have been turning up at immigration offices right now trying to be registered, and that is not happening. But do not, and I put down another marker here tonight, Madam Speaker, do not underestimate the mischief in this country. Because on the night before the registration process was supposed to be finished, all of a sudden, a small handful of UNC activists and mischief makers paid by the UNC turned up outside the Oval and turned up outside the Parliament on Friday. And when they turned up here in the morning, they didn't have placards. When I left to go and do something at lunchtime, oh, they had best type of placards possible. And I put on the Hansard here this evening that was paid for by the opposition of Trinidad and Tobago. And despite all that they've done, Madam Speaker, I thank the people of Trinidad and Tobago for their humanity, for their patience, for their tolerance, for their sense of decency, and allowing the registration process to take place, allowing us to cater for those who are here. And I end by saying it continues to be the priority of this government to look after its citizens of Trinidad and Tobago first and foremost. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Naparima.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, listening to the member for Port of Spain North, St. Anne's West, I now see why the country is in such a dilemma that it is in at this moment. That people have lost confidence in this government because they live in la-la land. Everything is good. Everything is hunky-dory. Madam Speaker, how could one look at the TIPS report 2019 and say that it lauded what the government did? Madam Speaker, this is...
A point of order. That is not what I said. I said it made no reference to the registration process.
Stand in order.
You know, in our enthusiasm, I think we still have to be honorable gentlemen. Okay, member for Port of Spain North, Diego Martin West, I overrule your attempt to invoke a standing order.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, to read this report and say that in any way at all it has exonerated Trinidad and Tobago is to, in any way at all, it is to indicate, Madam Speaker, that they do not understand or cannot read. And if they read, they cannot understand. Madam Speaker, this report is an F. It is an F. It is going to class, coming last in test, and telling your parents, I have done well, exceedingly well. Madam Speaker, it says, and it was talking about this government generally, and I made the applicability to the screening process. And let me read it again. I want to read two things from the report. Due to a lack of screening, the government penalized some trafficking victims, including children, for immigration offenses as a result of trafficking crime. It did not adequately screen migrants, asylum seekers, or refugees for trafficking indicators, including among Venezuelans. That is in the report, and they cannot change the facts. Facts are stubborn things. But what this report also said, and I have said it previously on diverse occasions, they do not have a plan, this government. And the Americans stated it and indicated an advice in prioritized action. Begin drafting a national action plan for the period after 2020. Which brings me to the question, what happens after this 1 year, Madam Speaker? What happens? They have come with vague, obfuscatory answers that they have a right to relook at it and they will assess it somewhere down the line. Madam Speaker, it does not make sense. The average, let me tell you, the average Trinidadian and Tobagonian does not know what is going to happen after this year. And you are not in a position to tell us because you have no plan. Madam Speaker, he talks about xenophobia. He talks about xenophobia and he provided statistics. Madam Speaker, how could we be xenophobic? The member for Port of Spain North St. Anne's. When we were in power in 2011, we gave out 824 certificates of citizenship. That is being xenophobic. We did it the correct way. We don't flip-flop and do things by VAPs. In 2012, we gave out 1,187 certificates of citizenship. And we did it the correct way, and we showed that we were a welcoming nation. That is not xenophobia. Madam Speaker, it was 1,046. But guess what? When they came into power, in 2016, it went down to 108. What does that statistic tell us? And see, facts are stubborn things. They don't go away. It means either you do not have the capacity to process citizenship, or you are xenophobic. Madam Speaker, you are xenophobic. Madam Speaker. And the question about how many people coming from Venezuela to Trinidad. Madam Speaker, when you look at the form, the information, we should have been gathering data from whether they came from Icacos, whether they came from Cedros, whether they came from Granville, etc., how they arrived, because that will tell you about the trade routes. A simple question, did you come by land or sea? Madam Speaker, and telling me about how a land or sea. There are other, we use that when you're coming legitimately into a country. When you're coming illegally, you come by pirogue, you could come by plane, you could come by all other means. You could come by ferry, transport ferry. So they would know. Madam Speaker, in terms of protecting the borders, they like to give the impression that now they have 24-hour radar and whatnot. They do not have the capacity to patrol our borders. And they like to talk about how we love the Coast Guard so much, and we love the military men, and we love the immigration people. Madam Speaker, it was in this House that I raised the point that the soldiers and the Coast Guard men were not fed, and there were reports that they were eating chana and bread. They loved the Coast Guard soldiers so much that they fed them chana and bread. And when the president raised the point that you cannot have soldiers starving, figures came to this parliament where sums were budgeted for the senior officers, and I think the figure could be plus or minus 200,000, I could be wrong, $2.4 million for the senior officers, all $8 million allocated for junior officers, $2 million spent, which means that this Minister of Finance, Diego Martin Northeast, was literally starving our soldiers and our Coast Guardsmen and saying we love them. Madam Speaker,
Point of order. 8.1 plus 4.
Please continue.
Madam Speaker, if you could manage the country as well as you seek to disturb me, then we would be better off. We would be better off. Madam Speaker, we left them 12 Coast Guard Damon vessels purchased in 2015. I don't want to hear no OPV story, Madam Speaker, because the vessels in Trinidad, I went to, some friends invited me down the islands. All the vessels tied up, all in Stobles Bay, instead of patrolling the southeast coast. Who are you fooling? They're not giving, this Minister of Finance not giving them finance to buy fuel. Our Coast Guard vessels are under-resourced. Incompetence. Stand up for one time and accept your irresponsibility on that side. 12 Coast Guard Damon vessels. 4 Damon Stand Patrol 509 Coast Guard vessels. Speed in excess of 28 knots. And I could go on and on. We left them enough vessels. This incompetent bunch of PNMIs, instead of taking the equipment and delivering, they're not getting the job done. Madam Speaker, you made the point.
Of order. 48.1.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. As I say, you should spend more time running this country. Sorry. Okay.
Come on, let's
Thanks
get
very much.
Yes.
Right. Madam Speaker, they made some comments about Maruga and how we came and we are imbeciles and whatnot. Who are you to judge me? My grandparents fought the United States in the 1812 war. Madam Speaker.
Standing order 8.1. I recognize very little of the words the member is saying.
That was my point.
That can't be English.
Not speaking English.
Madam Speaker, point of order, please. 44.8.
Not speaking English.
Madam Speaker, according to Standing Order 44.8, I'd like to invoke.
Okay, so I will allow you at the end to correct whatever it is.
Thank you very much, Madam.
Tell the member for Port of Spain, North, St. Anne's West. I come from a proud legacy of soldiers who fought in the 1812 war, and we beat the Americans, and they gave us land in Trinidad and Tobago. I'm a fighter, a warrior. If I were a Hindu, I would be a Chatri. That's so? A Chatri. I am a warrior caste. A warrior caste. Madam, I'm a proud citizen of Trinidad and Tobago, and I'll defend it with my last blood. Madam Speaker, the question about protecting the privacy. The member misunderstood.
Disturb, I'm not hearing. 53, please. All these members here.
Okay, so I know some members, excite us a little more, but I want us all to remember where we are. All right, and to please be guided by Standing Order 53. Member Van Appelgem.
Madam Speaker, I find it somewhat distasteful to insult people of Trinidad and Tobago who happen to be of the Katria caste, Madam Speaker. You don't make joke out of people. Perhaps you need another baptism, Madam Speaker. Another baptism. Madam Speaker, we reject and we call for the annulment of these regulations because they are inconsistent with best practices, global best practices. I have pointed out to the conventions on migrants and on refugees, and I was pleased to learn that they said that they were talking about migrants. If it is migrants, then they are inconsistent with 2 provisions, the privacy provision and the one dealing with the basis of equity and equality of treatment in terms of the education of the children of migrants. Madam Speaker, the second reason why we are against it is because much as they say, and I now see why this country is mismanaged and is going nowhere, to come and say that we have 16,000 or thereabouts migrants is not to understand that in the collection of data, it must be contextualized to the circumstances that is before you. And therefore, it does not include those who are criminals, and it does not include those who, for whatever reason, did not present itself. I hope, member for Port of Spain North, St. Anne's West, that you are not hoping to develop policy on the assumption that there are only 16,000 Venezuelans in Trinidad and Tobago. Only you alone would believe that. The other point I want to raise, Madam Speaker, is because of the inability to get information that deals with the criminals, which is critical because we have in Trinidad and Tobago increasingly and noticeably a Venezuelan upon Venezuelan crime. Venezuelans are killing Venezuelans. We have to somehow gather the intelligence, and I was suggesting that this could have been a mechanism to get that intelligence to help us in that situation. Madam Speaker, if we cannot, the Minister of Port of Spain, the member for Port of Spain North, St. Anne's West, he's talking about data and information. Madam Speaker, we know that he is the most incompetent Minister of National Security. We have 60,000 shooters, according to the Commissioner of Police, and 88,000 police officers. It means that we have 164 police officers for every shooter, and we can't find them, notwithstanding the fact that the Attorney General has told us. Yes.
Please, I'm ruling on relevance. That's irrelevant. Come back to what you're speaking about, which is what is before us. Right.
So the question, Madam Speaker, is that when we look at this data, and it is not to say that we are condemning our society. We in Trinidad are loyal patriots, aren't we? We work for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. It's just we want a government that can deliver first world standards for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. We do not want a government that lays off 65,000 workers and call that a success story. Lay off 5,000 workers in Petrotrin and call that a success story. We do not want a trafficking report that gives us a F, and the Minister of National Security is looking all over to find ways where they said that we are doing great things. I just want to, and I want to raise the point, but the report talks about corruption in police, immigration service. I'm quoting here. Yes, sorry.
Whatever, please make it relevant to what we're debating. All right? No, Anna. Whatever you're going to say, ensure it's relevant to what we're debating. All right? Okay.
Well, Madam Speaker, I was responding to the Minister of National Security, but I will not go in that direction. Madam Speaker, we have the view, and I want to lay it on record, we do not criticize the workers in Trinidad and Tobago, or the public servants in Trinidad and Tobago, the members of the Immigration Department, our police service. They are hardworking, but poorly led, Madam Speaker. And when I'm speaking poorly led, I'm talking about the policy level. Those who are supposed to develop the policies to inform the operational and tactical aspects of what the police, excuse me, the issues that they're supposed to. So nowhere must it be said at all that we are in any way making pejorative comments. When we speak about the Coast Guard here, we fight for them. We want them to have the best equipment as we left for them. We argue in the budget for them to get the proper allocations. And we argue for them to be led efficiently and effectively. Madam Speaker, I, in closing, would like to say that we support the annulment of the regulations because we feel that it is not well thought out. It could be better scripted, it could be better informed, it could be data-driven, and it should be based on international best practices. Madam Speaker, I beg to move.
Minister of National Security.
Speaker, I invoke 46.2, the right of reply. Madam Speaker, just to close off the debate here this evening, because it's time that we really stop wasting the House's time, I'd like to once again correct and end the Hansard record on the correct note that the U.S. TIPS report, as I said previously, in no way whatsoever, and it was me who said, in no way whatsoever refers to the registration of Venezuelan process that has just been successfully concluded. The member for Naparima tried once again to twist it, to turn it. No matter what he does with the language, Madam Speaker, it is not going to change what is stated there. The TIPS report 2019 in no way whatsoever covers this registration process that was successfully concluded. Furthermore, it is wholly incorrect to suggest that this country was given an F by the TIPS report. It is a tiered report. Tier 1 is that you satisfy everything. There are different tiers. In Tier 2, you could have a lower level, Tier 2, where you need to do certain things or you're going to be blacklisted. We are not there. The report did, in fact, commend Trinidad and Tobago for a number of initiatives it's put in place. We would be the first to say that there's work to be done. And we've never denied that there's further work to be done. Because you see, Madam Speaker, when we came in as an administration, and the facts would show this, it was a complete mess. There was no children's authority working. There was no one looking after trafficking of children, all these types of things. We had to build it. We moved us upwards. And under this government, we're now at a top level, Tier 2, and we will continue to work towards a Tier 1. So there's no F, there's no failure card. The next point I heard was reference to vessels. I had to correct the point on marine vessels. I was going to avoid it. Madam Speaker, you stopped me, you cautioned me, and I said I'd retreat from it. But of course, the member for Naparima opened it widely by even talking about the types of vessels. Population of Trinidad and Tobago, I want you all to know this. It's not about OPVs, because we all know the OPV story. The government of Trinidad and Tobago, prior to 2010, ordered 6 hostile fast patrol vessels. Those 6 hostile fast patrol vessels were delivered. What the government between 2010 and 2015 did not do is maintain the vessels. When we came in as an administration, former Chief of Defense Staff, Major General retired Edmund Dillon, met hostile vessels that were actually moored up. And when he made the inquiries why those vessels weren't being put to work, it was because the UNC administration did not renew the maintenance contracts. They did not properly maintain the vessels. So in other words, they ran the vessels down and put them in a state where the country could no longer use them so they could do what they do best. Because one thing the administration between 2010 and 2015 could do is award contracts. They could give out contracts, and they could give out overvalued contracts as well. And Madam Speaker, that is what was done to get the same Damon vessels that you've heard reference to. And another former CDS, Chief of Defense Staff, the member for Dabadi O'Meara, was right. I heard him, and I'm putting it on the record. I heard him saying that those vessels are not properly suited for Trinidad and Tobago. So that is what the Coast Guard was faced with. So all of the screams, the cries, and the shouts, and the abuse, the continued abuse, because you see, the member for Naparima spoke with forked tongue, because he realized after he spent 40 original minutes and another 25 minutes abusing the men and women of the public service, crying down the immigration service, saying the Coast Guard is useless, saying the Defense Force can't do his job, he quickly caught himself. And he said, you know what? We also want to thank you, We also appreciate the work you do. But I tell you something, it is not any of us who are elected on this side that have to go out on the seas 24/7 and do the work they did. So when we thank them, it's a sincere thanking. And another point I'd like to make, Madam Speaker, is they are hardworking. and they're not poorly led. Even at the policy level, they are saying that they are grateful and they are happy that this administration is the administration that is leading them now. So all of the screams and all of the cries don't change the facts. And the facts are that it was a successfully concluded registration process. We know who is here. We know, and we're going through the due diligence exercise now. We have gathered the information. We're processing and analyzing the information. There were specific desks there.
I just raise a point of clarification. Is it 44-8 that the member has been allowed to speak on?
The members under 46-2, he said that. Write a reply.
Don't try that. You did that deliberately.
Madam Speaker,
You can't fool me.
you see, every time we begin to tell the truth, every time we speak on the side and we correct the record, we expect the interruptions.
Yes.
Without much further ado, Madam Speaker,
Deliberate interruptions.
otherwise,
Yes, I do.
the registration process has provided us with the invaluable information. The registration process, and you know, once again, the member for Naparima went back and he made all of these screaming rants and raves and caused two members on this side to ask whether it was infringing
Language.
Standing Order 8.1 and the language of the House is English. And I go back to the form just to correct once again before I take my seat, the record. As I had said, because he said the form only talks about whether you arrive by land or by sea. But what if you come in from Maruga? I am proud and I'm from a family that fought in... He ain't fight nothing. He's fight his own decibel. He has done nothing. Absolutely achieved nothing. All he did is have a lunch or a dinner with a racist. That is his achievement. The form says
Madam Speaker,
what port of entry...
48.6. You cannot... 3 minutes.
I know it's past 6 p.m., so people might feel they're somewhere else. We're still here. Okay? Member for Port of Spain North, St. Anne's West. Please continue.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the form says, and this is only under details of travel, what port of entry did you come in? What airport, Piarco or ANR Robinson, Tobago? What seaport, and it provides Port of Spain, San Fernando, Scarborough, Chaguarama, Cedros, or other means, if it's not one of those 5 legal ports of entry, put where you came in from. And I will tell the population, Madam Speaker, all of the registrants provided us with information as to where they came in, including all of the illegal ports of entry, what vessels they came in on, if they paid to come in on those vessels, and who were the persons that provided them with the information to come across, etc. So, Madam Speaker, without much further ado, I think once again their motion has been shown for exactly what it is, a complete waste of our parliamentary time. Which one? Yeah, no, that's okay. It was on the same tips report. Yeah. So, Madam Speaker, with those few words, I thank you.
Honorable members, the question is, be it resolved that this House annul the Immigration Amendment Regulations 2019. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against?
Mrs. Robertson Regis?
Sorry.
Mrs. Robertson Regis?
No.
Mr. Alwari?
No.
Mr. Ember?
Double no.
Mr. Young?
Absolutely not.
Mr. Hines?
No.
Mr. Mitchell?
No.
Mr. Garcia?
No.
Mrs. Critchlow Coburn,
No.
Mr. Ford,
No.
Mr. Dillon,
No.
Mrs. Webster Roy,
No.
Dr. Gatsby Dolly,
No.
Mrs. Janine Smith,
No.
Miss Olivier,
No.
Mr. Antoine,
No.
Mr. Leons,
No.
Mr. Smith,
No.
Mr. Lee,
Yes.
Mr. Charles,
Yes.
Dr. Rambachan, Mr. Karim,
Yes.
Dr. Tiwari,
Yes.
Mrs. Gayadeen-Gopeesingh,
Yes.
Dr. Bodo,
Yes.
Mr. Pare,
Yes.
Ms. Ramdial,
Absolutely yes.
Madam Speaker, the results of the division are 9-4, 17 against, and 0 abstention.
Honorable members, the result of the division is 9 members voted in favor, 17 members voted against. There were no abstentions. The noes have it. The motion to annul is not carried. Leader of the House.
Thank you very kindly, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, what date is Wednesday? I beg to move that this House do now adjourn to Wednesday, the 3rd day of July at 1:30 p.m. Madam Speaker, on that day, we will do motion number 2, which reads, be it resolved that this House adopt the report of the Joint Select Committee appointed to consider and report on the Trinidad and Tobago Revenue Authority Bill 2018. Thank you very kindly, Madam Speaker.
Honorable members, the question is that this House do now adjourn to Wednesday, 3rd July 2019 at 1:30 p.m. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. This House now stands adjourned to Wednesday, 3rd July 2019 at 1:30 p.m.